அவத்தா விட போறோமா? அவனை பார்த்தா காலேஜ் என்ன சொல்லி விட்டேன்? ஒரு மாதிரி ஒரு சைஸா போவானே. ஆமா, ஆக்சுவலி ஒரு நாளைக்கு அங்க தங்குவாரன் இங்க தங்குவாரன்.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
Okay. Good evening, sir. Dr. John
evening, sir.
Segar. Welcome to the St. Joseph University webinar. And let us do little formalities first. Anand, are you available? You are.
Yes.
Okay.
I'm available. I am available.
Okay. Thank you.
I'm here.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, let's start the program. Greetings from St. Joseph University. I welcome all the participants. To start with, I request Dr. D. Sarulata to give a welcome note.
Thank you, sir. With the blessings of our very Reverend Father, Dr. J. Arulraj, Founder Chancellor, Honorable Dr. V. Subbaya Bharati, Vice Chancellor, St. Joseph University, respected Dr. M. Muthukannan, Registrar, St. Joseph University, esteemed resource person, Dr. Jairaj John Sekar, former head and associate professor, American College, Madurai, Respected Dr. Selvin, Professor of English, convener for the International Webinar Series, and Dr. Dunstan, Professor of English, St. Joseph University, dear faculty friends, scholars, researchers, and participants worldwide. Good evening to one and all. It is my privilege to welcome one and all for the International Webinar Series organized by the Department of English, St. Joseph University, Dindivanam, on emerging trends in humanities. Today's theme is environmental humanities and the Anthropocene, exploring how humanities can deepen our understanding of environmental issues and sustainability. We are honored to have our guest of honor whose insights will enrich our eco-critical discourse. Once again, a warm welcome to everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Saralata. Now I invite our dear Professor Joseph Dunstan to introduce the speaker. Anand, the podium is yours.
Good evening to everyone. Am I audible?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, sir.
Dr. John Sekhar Jairaj is my bosom friend for more than 1 decade. We have been together in almost all the activities of English department all over Tamil Nadu. Dr. John Sekhar got his PhD in English language teaching from Madurai Kamaraj University. He has got PGDTE from CFL Hyderabad and PG Diploma in Communicative English Teaching also from Hyderabad and PG Diploma in Higher Education besides multiple diplomas in higher education. He has put in 37 years of service and he was also the head of the Department of English in American College, Madurai. He was Dean of Student Affairs and Dean of Academic Affairs, and also he became the coordinator for NAC accreditation for 7 years. And he has got a rich experience in higher education. He has produced around 65 MPhil scholars and 16 PhD scholars. And I still remember he was a student of MA English in St. Joseph's College, I think with savants like Dr. Armstrong from Madras University and all those people. And you know, he has got around 125 publications in leading journals. And he has presented around 122 papers like Elsevier and all those things. And he is also a reviewer of the leading journals today. Till yesterday, I could see him that he was giving a talk on English studies in 21st century in Kuttalam Parashakti College. The whole of this month, I could see him giving talks along with both the international journals. And today, I'm sure you'll all enjoy because his books most of the books are based on theories. He has written more than 21 books, and of which, after this in-campus books, the latest books on grammar, literary theories, and humanities, I even recommend all those who participate here, kindly buy that book, New Humanities, that will give you all that is needed to understand the emerging humanities. Such a great personality. He will be delivering his talk on environmental criticism and Anthropocene. And that is his real nature of all theories. He can do wonderfully well. And I would like to also record here that recently in Scott Christian College, when we had a seminar on Shakespeare, from Shakespeare to Absurd Theatre, I delivered the inaugural address and he was the resource person, which was really appreciated by almost all the teachers of English in MS University. And many a time we meet whenever he comes down for any literary meet in any of the colleges here in Kanyakumari district. Today, you will definitely enjoy the literary feast, and his masterpieces are literary theories, and in his books he simplifies the literary theory. And I am proud to say I have all his 21 books in my shelves, and I refer to his books for whenever I deliver a talk on literary theory. My dear loving John Sager, the podium is yours now. Kindly take up.
Thank you, Professor. Thank you so much. Can I start?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I requested the organizers to share the PPT. Usually I don't do it because it clashes with the speed with delivering my talk. So kindly bear with me, and I'm thankful to the organizers for their readiness to share the screen with the participants. Good evening to all respected teachers and scholars who are participating in this international webinar series on emerging humanities. At the outset, I congratulate every one of you on choosing to attend this series in spite of the busy schedule, academic schedule for this semester. And I myself have been attending this series of webinars. This is the sixth in number, I believe. At the outset, I would like to heartily congratulate the Department of English, St. Joseph's University, its administrative, academic authorities, convener of the series, Dr. Selvin, whose two talks I was privileged to listen to in the second and third week, and co-convener Dr. Joseph Dunstan, who introduced me to this institution and invited me as a resource person. So I congratulate all of them on organizing a 15 Saturdays international webinar spread over 3 months on a very relevant topic at a time the departments of English have come under attack for its so-called non-utility existence within the academia worldwide, not only in Tamil Nadu, not only in India, but worldwide. And I think that if in my experience, St. Joseph's University at Dindivanam is the first institution that has started this 15-week-long webinar. Other institutes, or institution, they do it for a day or two or maximum 7 days in the name of faculty development program. But I think it is something that we all should appreciate, the very idea of holding it over a period of 3 months and on 15 Saturdays. Maybe quite convenient time also for most of the teachers. And these days, at the beginning of this new academic year, most institutions work on Saturdays too. So in spite of their academic schedule, teachers and scholars have chosen to attend this. Maybe number may vary from one session to another session, but then more than 100 participants do participate every week, because I understand from the participation list that Professor Selvin shares with the participants. So many outside the academia are of the opinion that humanities as an academic discipline offering undergraduate, postgraduate research programs are by and large confined to tertiary level educational institutions, and that they are divorced from public. Academia is divorced from public. Humanities are divorced from the public, who are the real owners of the humanities. Emergent Humanities, the title the organizers have given, and I gave my book the title New Humanities. Whether it is Emergent Humanities or New Humanities, these two terms give two different interpretations, backgrounds, address this gap and bring back humanities to the public. Humanities are not the properties of the academia, but humanities proper belong to the public. So by holding such a conferences, we are taking a small step to bring back humanities to the public. And friends, before we discuss environmental humanities and the Anthropocene as given as a theme for this week's webinar as a field of research, let us remember our primary identity as teachers of English. We may be researchers, we may be scholars, but basically our identity is that we are teachers of English, and we deal with young adult youths. So every new development in literary studies eventually reshapes what we teach, how we teach, and the questions we encourage our students to ask. So today's session, therefore, my friends, is not merely an introduction to yet another new critical movement, but I would say it is an invitation to expand our pedagogical repertoire, because we are basically teachers. It is not enough if we know more about different emergent humanities. We should also convert this new knowledge into something that has pedagogical relevance. So we must enhance our pedagogical repertoire in terms of learning to read literature through a new lens. And today we are, some of us, if you are not familiar with this particular humanities, no, we are going to see how literature can be read through ecological lens. But before, next slide, please. Before I start environmental humanities, Professor Selvin has already delivered a lecture extensively on climate humanities, climate change, climate fiction, different terms that we are using. And since now I have been attending this webinar series from day one, I thought that I think from my experience when I introduce new humanities or emergent humanities or any literary theory, I make it a point to deal with the background. So today's background to the whole webinar series is, since others have not touched upon, the first 5 scholars have not touched upon, I thought I could make a distinction between emergent humanities or new humanities and what is the opposite of emergent humanities. What is the new humanities? What do we call traditionally traditional humanities? So all participant teachers, scholars, students, you should know that the basic differences between traditional humanities, which is roughly more than 2000 years old. So just like that, we cannot brush away the features, the essences of traditional humanities, because traditional humanities have been with us for nearly 2000 years. But now, last 30 years, 3 decades or so, now we see the birth of new humanities. Not one humanity, but you have several humanities. The book that Professor Dunson referred to, I gave the title New Humanities, 60 New Humanities, where I have done research, and then I have included 60 New Humanities, and I planning to publish the complementary volume, the second volume of 60 New Humanities before end of this year, before December 2026, and I have identified yet another set of 60 humanities. So in my kitty now I have 120 humanities which have arisen or emerged as a response to traditional humanities. So as a traditional humanities, we think of just one. Whereas what is challenging these traditional humanities, not one or two, but more than 100, 130 humanities I have so far identified. So my second volume of new humanities will have another 60 humanities. So friends, the distinction is not matter of chronology, which comes first, which comes second, but it reflects profound shift in how knowledge is conceived. We want to know the difference between traditional humanities, with which we are familiar, we have been practicing, we have been disseminating in our classes, and the new humanities. There is a profound shift in how knowledge is conceived, or how questions are asked, what questions are asked, how methods are employed, how scholarship is related to society. And therefore, I think that I can first briefly make a distinction in terms of about say 10, I think minimum 10 differences I can give you. As you see it on the slide, the first one is the shift is from human-centered to planetary thinking. Traditional humanities generally place humans at the center of inquiry. Man is the measure of everything. Everything is judged. Everything is created for the sake of man. This is the one of the philosophies of traditional humanities. So literature, philosophy, and history are interpreted primarily through human experiences, human values, human ethics, and human creativity. On the other hand, emergent humanities argue now that humans cannot be understood in isolation. Humans cannot understand themselves in isolation. They explore relationships among humans and nature, humans and artificial intelligence, humans and animals, humans and machines, humans and climate systems, humans and biotechnology. So humans have to understand themselves in terms of so many other stakeholders in the planet. Examples include environmental humanities, climate humanities, ocean humanities, animal humanities, energy humanities, forest humanities, blue humanities. I can give you a list of 100 and plus humanities. So instead of asking what does literature reveal about human nature, traditionally humanities no focus on that question. What does literature, what does this poem, what does this character reveal about human nature? But now emergent humanities ask how do literary works shape our understanding of ecological crisis as far as as far as environmental humanities is concerned? And number two, the shift is from disciplinary boundaries to knowledge networks. Traditional humanities are organized into separate academic departments like departments of English, philosophy, history, fine arts, languages, classical studies, and so on. And very rarely do we meet intellectually with other departments. For example, English department, we confine ourselves only to what was introduced exactly 100 years ago, a new criticism. We just textual criticism or ontological criticism. We take a text and then we analyze and then we come to a conclusion. Or we choose 2-3 works by the same author, then we write a PhD, then we claim that we have completely understood the entire arena of the creativity of that particular writer. So we are become specialists in interpretation of individual texts or individual writers, leave alone not meeting, not reading, not combining knowledge from other humanities, a discipline like philosophy, history, fine arts, language studies, and so on. This is the strength and limitations of traditional humanities. Whereas emergent humanities dissolve these rigid boundaries. For example, digital humanities that you already listened to combines literary study. English department alone cannot offer. I think the course that was offered by one of the private universities in the south, which has got off campus in Pune, they have now suspended MA Digital Humanities program because English department alone cannot offer a course like Digital Humanities because it combines knowledge from literary studies, computer science, data science, statistics, archival science, visualization, linguistics. So you got to bring in rope in knowledge from all the scholars from all these disciplines in order to offer. In that sense, we say that almost all emergent humanities are basically multidisciplinary or interdisciplinary in nature. Okay, so this is the point that I want to say. So disciplinary boundaries. From there now we move to a network of knowledge. Knowledge becomes a collaborative. Knowledge cannot be produced by English departments, teachers alone, scholars alone. No, it becomes a collaborative. Knowledge becomes a collaborative rather than compartmentalized. You cannot, English department cannot claim this is knowledge belonging to English department. These days, no, that I have last 1 month I have adjudicated 3 PhD theses from 2 Kerala universities, and they have moved faster. They move away from this monodisciplinary perspective toward multidisciplinary perspective. And the third distinction is that the shift is from interpretation to problem solving. Traditional humanities primarily interpret meaning. Questions include, for example, what does Hamlet signify? Usually we ask this question. What is romanticism? We ask our student. We ask student write an assignment. How does a Dickens portray Victorian society? It's a usual question. Whereas emergent humanities ask questions like, how can literature contribute to climate justice? How can narrative improve healthcare, medical humanity? How can storytelling combat misinformation? How can digital archives preserve endangered languages? So, interpretation becomes socially actionable, not simply textual interpretation. Something that must have some contemporary relevance to the times, society in which we live. The fourth shift is from canon to diversity. Traditional humanities now concentrated largely on canonical authors. Lot of politics about canonization. Examples include Shakespeare, Milton, Homer, Plato, Dante, Wordsworth, and so on. You know that all those writers who find a space within our curriculum from undergraduate to research level constitute what we call canonical writers. Nobody knows why these writers are included or many other writers are excluded. Why there are so many male writers, why there is an exclusion of large scale women writers, why history of English literature books don't deal with women writers, even though there have been plenty of women writers in the history of English literature. Whereas emergent humanities expand the corpus to include indigenous literature. I think that last week we listened to indigenous knowledge system, Dalit writing, African narratives, disability narratives, LGBTQ plus literature, digital storytelling, or graphic novels, social media narratives, oral tradition, so on. So the emphasis shifts from literary greatness to literary greatness alone. Now we have been believing in that, not just literary greatness alone, but it moves to representational diversity and epistemic inclusion, the term that Selvin frequently used in his talk on climate change, I believe. So epistemic, no knowledge is excluded. The fifth shift I see is from stable knowledge to dynamic knowledge. Knowledge that is passive now moves knowledge that becomes a powerful and dynamic living. Traditional humanities often regarded text as relatively stable cultural artifacts. Okay, text is almost lifeless. It is only the readers who are bringing life to the text and they are interpreting. Whereas emergent humanities recognize that knowledge evolves continuously. It's good that the institution the organizers have given this title emergent, because it keeps on emerging. In only 30 years, these humanities have community existent. It will go a long way. It will take another 100 years, or 200 years, and 1,000 years for each of these humanities to become matured. So emergent humanities recognize that knowledge ever evolves continuously because of, say, in the present context, artificial intelligence, social media, globalization, migration, biotechnology. These things were absent 50 years ago or 100 years ago. Now, consequently, what happens is research agendas remain dynamic rather than something that is fixed. Now, the fourth characteristic of the humanities, new humanities being different from old humanities or traditional humanities, the shift is from print culture to digital culture. Traditional humanities rely heavily on books or manuscript archives and libraries. Even MLA handbook use the term nomenclature, what is called bibliography, meaning books. But now they have changed the nomenclature to works cited, because books can refer to anything from print to digital, multimodal, and so on. So emergent humanities investigate digital archives, virtual museums, AI-generated text. I think that the inaugural address, Registrar, Vice Chancellor, I believe, shared with us a particular research output that participants found computer-generated text more interesting, appealing than man-made the text. So you have to accept the reality. Computational analysis, gaming, storytelling, social media discourse, and so on. For example, digital humanities scholars may analyze thousands of novels. Now, what we call distant reading, what you are familiar with, what I've been practicing for past 1 century is close reading. But now digital humanities has given a new method of reading large corpus called distant reading using number of apps, the AI apps, still, we can continue with close reading of selected text. The seventh one is the move is from national identity, global challenges. Traditional humanities often focus on national literature, say Indian writing in English, African literature, American English, Australian literature. Very often, traditional humanities focus on national literature, national history, and national linguistic traditions. Whereas emergent humanities address challenges that transcend national boundaries. These include climate change, pandemics, AI ethics, migration, food security, sustainability, digital inequality. These things cannot be confined to one particular nation. So the unit of analysis shifts from the nation to interconnected global systems. The eighth difference is the move is from scholarship for specialists to public humanities. Traditional humanities largely communicate through journal articles, monographs, or university college classroom, all confined to academics and scholars. Okay, so our purpose is to create scholarship. Whereas emergent humanities emphasize public engagement through museums, podcasts, or digital exhibitions, citizen humanities, public history, community archives, community programs, policy discussions, and so on. So research increasingly aims to influence public understanding and decision making. And the last but one is shift is from anthropocentrism to more than human perspective. So we have to move to that perspective, more than the human, not human alone. Emergent humanities challenge the assumption that humans are the sole or primary subjects of value. Everything must be judged by, for the human beings. New fields, like I said, animal humanities, plant humanities, multi-species studies, post-humanities, blue humanities, in which you find human beings become just one stakeholder. There are other stakeholders in this world, in this planet. So these fields investigate how literature or philosophy and culture imagine relationships among humans, relationships among animals, relationships among plants, oceans, and technical systems. And the last distinction is, the shift is from critique alone to social transformation. We all know that traditional humanities excel at critical analysis of individual or multiple literary texts and then interpretation. More than any other branches of humanities, we are good at critical analysis and interpretation, because traditionally we believe that literary texts are interpretive basic, because literary texts don't say anything. Literary texts are interpreted by the readers. So emergent humanities retain this crucial function, of course, no doubt about it, but increasingly seek to contribute to practical transformation, not just mere reading and interpretation alone, but they try to contribute to practical transformation. There, we gain some space in the relevant space and relevance in society. We are in English departments or humanities department cannot afford to live in ivory towers. We have to become part of a society by engaging with certain questions like, how can humanities inform environmental policy? Environmental policy, of course, they're designed by bureaucrats, administrators, but how can humanities inform such policy? How can narratives improve healthcare practice? How can cultural analysis support social justice? How can ethics guide AI development? How can arts and storytelling contribute to peace building? So we have to ask these questions, and so that we can relate to study of humanities to society. So next slide, please. It doesn't mean that should we continue with the traditional humanities, and should we reckon with the differences. So what should be our strategy? Okay, so it would be misleading to view emergent humanities as a replacement for traditional humanity. And I'm not arguing in this lecture that we must replace the traditional humanities, because I have given you 10 different focal points where we need to shift. So it is not a replacement of one by the emergent humanity. Rather, emergent humanities build upon the interpretive, historical, ethical, philosophical foundations established by traditional discipline. Foundations have been laid by traditional discipline. Now, all that the new humanities, the emergent humanities are engaged in is expanding their scope, expanding their methods, expanding their social relevance. Okay, so close reading, historical analysis, philosophical reflection, cultural criticism remain indispensable. We are not advocating the doing away with these some of these methods, but what changes is the context in which these methods are applied, the breadth of questions they are asked to address. In this sense, traditional humanities provide the necessary intellectual foundations, whereas emergent humanities represent an adaptive evolution of those traditions in response to defining challenges of the 21st century, which we have to face. Okay, so they retain, emergent humanities retain the humanities' commitment to understanding meaning, values, culture, but situate that commitment within a world which is increasingly shaped by ecological crises, digital technologies, or global interdependence, and demands for social inclusion. So, friends, 21st century has forced the humanities to confront a profound question. How should literature respond to a planet in crisis? All stakeholders of emerging humanities must understand that our planet, which we live, is in a deep crisis. How should literature respond to this crisis, a planet which is in crisis? It could be climate change, biodiversity loss, pollution, deforestation, species extinction, environmental justice, water scarcity, sustainable development. These are no longer merely scientific or political concerns. Don't think that economists, scientists, and technocrats will deal with these topics. They have become cultural concerns now. They have become ethical concerns. They have become philosophical concerns. And of course, they have become literary concerns also. So, environmental humanities emerge precisely from this realization. So, environmental humanities argue that environmental crises are not simply failures of technology. They are not simply failures of economics. They are also failures of imagination. They are failures of values, as Amitav Ghosh says. They are failures of stories, literature. They are failures of culture. Since literature shapes how people perceive nature, how remember landscape, how people imagine futures, how they define their relationship with the non-human life, English studies occupies a central place within the environmental humanities. As teachers of literature, we are therefore, friends, not merely teaching poems and novels as we have been doing, as I did for 37 years. Those days are gone. You can't take literary texts in isolation and try to interpret and share with the student. No, those days are gone. That comfort zone is gone now, disappeared totally. Now we are helping students rethink humanity's place within this living world. It is not a living, it's not a dead world. So how to help students rethink our place in this within this living world? Okay, next slide, please. So what does the term environmental humanities mean now? Now I come to the theme proper. Environmental humanities, as I told you, an interdisciplinary or multidisciplinary or transdisciplinary or cross-disciplinary field that brings together literature, philosophy, history, geography, ecology, cultural studies, ethics, indigenous studies, media studies, and of course environmental science, all brought together into literary text, into literature classroom, into the department, into our domain, in order to examine the complex relations between humans and more than the human world. World is not just human, more than human, a world in which now we live. Humans alone don't matter. So rather than treating nature merely as a background for human action, as canonical texts have projected from the days of Shakespeare, Wordsworth, and all, most of these writers have treated nature as mere background, 100 pages, writers, before they start their plot, they spend on description of the natural background. Humanities and environmental humanities view humans as one participant within this vast ecological community. Okay, so the whole planet, the whole world, the whole cosmos doesn't belong to humans alone. There are so many other stakeholders. One widely accepted definition of environmental humanities comes from environmental scholar Deborah Bird Rose and her colleagues, who describe environmental humanities as an intellectual movement, as we call romantic movement. It is an intellectual movement that seeks to understand ecological crises through cultural meanings, through ethical responsibilities, through historical relationships between humans and nature. So in literary studies, environmental humanity expand eco-criticism by asking questions like, how does literature imagine nature? How do stories influence environmental behavior? Whose environments are protected? Whose environments are let down? Whose environments are sacrificed? Can literature contribute to ecological crisis? Okay, so please, next slide, please. So we move on to the next question is, why do environmental humanities matter today? Why should we talk about environmental humanities now? So when we have hundreds of humanities, why should the English department focus on environmental humanities also, if you put the question that way? Because we live in what many scholars call now Anthropocene. That is the additional title to today's theme, environmental humanities and Anthropocene. Anthropocene humanities I have included as a chapter in my book. So I have no time to deal with that now. But now, what is Anthropocene mean? Anthropocene, anthropo man. No, Anthropocene refers to an age. We live in an age in which our activity, human activity, has become a geological force, not just a regional force, a geological force that affects Earth's climate, that affects oceans, that affects forests, that affects biodiversity. So humanity, we are living at a time when humanity is making a lot of damage to the earth. Okay, so environmental problems, you can give 100 problems: climate change, global warming, forest deforestation, plastic pollution, ocean acidification, species extinction, environmental refugees, water scarcity, meaning, extraction, ecological inequality. So the list goes on. Science explains these problems, no doubt about it. All these problems that we face now because of greediness of humanity to appropriate the entire earth for their own sake can be explained by science. But environmental humanities friends ask, why do societies continue to produce problems despite knowing the consequences? Everyone now in Tamil Nadu, we understand lack of monsoon. In India, we are going to face severe drought. So, but the question is, science is not asking this question. Science explains the causes. Science gives a warning against these problems. But environmental humanities ask this basic question: why do people continue to produce these problems even though they know the consequences? So in the Anthropocene, humans view themselves as separate rulers of nature. Human beings, we are the rulers of nature. Bible says, go and enjoy the entire everything. Adam was given that kind of promise. People quote environmental the environmental and eco critics, they quote this biblical verse from the first book of Genesis: fowls of the air, fishes of the sea, everything is fine. So unmindfully, people started exploiting nature because humans view themselves as separate rulers of nature. They think they can control the planet. They also think they can manage damage that they cause to this planet. Donna Haraway, in a playful mood, created a new term. The new term is CHTHULUCNE. CHTHULU, Thulucene, meaning many armed, many connected beings. In the Thulucene, humans are just one strand in a web of life. They cannot control the planet, but they make kinship with the planet. They claim that human beings live and die together well. Let us live well, let us die together. When man dies, humanity dies, the environment also already died. Okay, so one cannot save the other. Next slide, please. Now let me move on to the major theories that have informed environmental humanities as an academic discipline. As I told you, it is an interdisciplinary or a multidisciplinary or cross-disciplinary field that draws on a wide range of theoretical perspectives. So literature teachers, scholars, students with a limited knowledge of limited literary textual knowledge, you cannot approach these particular humanities because, as I told you, it's interdisciplinary, multidisciplinary, and these perspectives, theoretical perspectives to understand the complex relationship between humans and non-human life, culture, the environment. So some of the major theories now that have informed here, I have given you. So very briefly, I explained to you, just once I explained to you, eco-criticism. Eco-criticism examines how literature, art and culture represent nature and environmental issues in literary texts. Eco-criticism highlights the role of storytelling in shaping ecological awareness. Science cannot create that ecological awareness. Science can deal with certain facts, but it is literature, it is storytelling, it is a narrative that can shape ecological awareness. Okay, and deep ecology. Deep ecology advocates intrinsic value of all living beings by arguing that humans are only one part of Earth's ecological community. We are just one part of ecological community. We should not dominate nature. Okay, so that is what deep ecology talks about. Ecofeminism, you know, that explores the connections between exploitation of nature and the oppression of women. It shows how systems of domination affect both environment and women. Then the next theory is a post-humanist theory. It challenges the idea that humans are the center of existence. Humans are no longer at the center of existence. That binary is questioned. It emphasizes the agency and importance of animals, importance of agency of plants, technologies, and other non-human entities. They are as important as a human being. The fifth one is new materialism. New materialism views matter, both living and non-living, as active rather than passive. Not one is active, others are passive. Not like that. Everybody, both living and non-living, they are active. New materialism recognizes that material forces shape human and ecological life. Okay, and political ecology. Political ecology investigates how political, economic, and social power influences environmental change, resource distribution, and ecological conflicts. Then I think you must be familiar with the theory environmental justice. It examines the unequal distribution of environmental benefits and harms as well. It focuses on how marginalized communities are disproportionately affected by pollution or climate change or natural disasters or resource exploitation. Then another important theory is ANT theory, actor network theory. Actor network theory treats humans and non-human entities as interconnected actors within the networks. It demonstrates how ecological outcomes emerge through these relationships. Then you got what we call systems theory and resilience theory. These theories explain ecosystems and societies as interconnected, adaptive systems that respond to environmental disturbances through feedback, resilience, and transformation. And the 10th theory is indigenous decolonial ecologies, which the previous speakers already made references to. So indigenous and decolonial ecologies draw on indigenous knowledge systems, decolonial perspectives to emphasize reciprocal relationships with local land, local traditional ecological knowledge, and critics of colonial approaches to nature. And the last but one theory that has informed environmental humanities is Anthropocene framework, which I already touched upon. It examines the geological, cultural consequences of human activities here. It argues that humanity has become a major force shaping the Earth's system. Okay. The last theory is multi-species studies. Multi-species studies investigates how humans exist with animals, with plants, with the fungi, flora, fauna, microbes. We have what is called microbial humanities, and emphasizes shared histories and interdependence across species. Okay, next slide, please. Now we move on to the major features of environmental humanities. I have identified 12 different major features. I have explained all these features in a detailed fashion in my book. Number one, the environmental humanities rejects anthropocentrism, that is human-centered thinking. Okay, so that kind of thinking is rejected by now. Traditional Western thought often places human above nature. They create a binary opposition between culture and nature, and then they think that human is above nature. Environmental humanities question this hierarchy. Instead of seeing forests, rivers, or animals or mountains merely as resources for the purpose of extraction, environmental humanities view them as living participants. They have their own life. They have their own thinking system within ecological systems. For example, Richard Powers' The Over story, I think that already referred to in the previous talk, radically overturns the traditional assumption that human beings are the center of narratives. When you read a narrative, who is the protagonist? Is the human protagonist. No, instead of treating trees merely as a scenery of symbols, the novel presents as living organisms with their own forms of communication, memory, and longevity and agency. Human lives appear very brief. We may live for 60 years, 70 years, 80 years, maximum 100 plus years. But when measured against centuries-long existence of forests, forests have been here for thousands of years. How can humans claim that they are the sole protagonists of any narrative? So here, by interviewing the stories of activists, scientists, and ordinary people with the lives of trees, Powers invites readers to recognize that humans are only one species among many within Earth's ecological community. Similarly, Annie Dillard's Pilgrim at Tinker Creek encourages readers to observe look at insects, birds, plants, and streams with equal attentiveness. As you watch any human activity, it demonstrates that nature possesses intrinsic value. We should not assume conveniently that man alone possesses intrinsic value. No, nature possesses intrinsic value independent of human usefulness. Whether human beings are useful or not, nature has its own intrinsic value. So, from these works challenge anthropocentrism and cultivate what we call ecocentric world, a foundational principle of environmental humanities. Number two, environmental humanities is a deeply interdisciplinary, as I already explained to you. So, environmental humanities dissolve these traditional academic boundaries. An English teacher may simultaneously discuss literature in literature class, ecology, ethics, history, geography, economics, indigenous knowledge, climate. So, without having a knowledge of these fields, one cannot go and handle environmental humanities or eco-criticism with academic transparency and fairness, confidence. For example, Rachel Carson's Silent Spring exemplifies this interdisciplinary nature of environmental humanities because it combines scientific research, as usually Amitav Ghosh does in every novel, and literary prose, environmental ethics, public policy, social activism. So Carson translated complex ecological data about pesticides into vivid, accessible language, and he has made scientific knowledge emotionally compelling. Science is not emotionally compelling. There lies the great role of literature that can play in the preservation of this planet. So this scientific knowledge is not so emotionally compelling as much as and culturally influential as much as literature. Her opening statement, A Fable to Tomorrow, employs literary techniques such as imagery, symbolism, narrative to imagine a town silenced by ecological destruction. So this book demonstrates that environmental problems cannot be understood through science alone, but now dominated by science. But environmental problems cannot be understood through science alone. They require collaboration between literature, biology, history, politics, and ethics, and so on. Okay. And the third feature is environmental humanities understand nature as culture, not nature and culture, no binary division. Nature as culture, they understand. So nature is never simply out there. Very often we think that what is nature other than the perceiver, other than me. Everything that I see here constitute nature. Every society imagines nature differently. For example, Indian sacred woods, as you have Mahabharata, Ramayana, and other classical works, Indian sacred woods, Native American landscapes, African forests, Australian Aboriginal dreaming, or even European pastoral tradition, all construct different relationships between people and environment. Now you take the writer who you are very familiar with, Chinua Achebe, Things Fall Apart, illustrates that nature is culturally constructed rather than merely physical. For Igbo community, forests, rivers, seasons, and agricultural cycles possess religious, social, and moral significance. I think that we have the advantage. We Indians have the advantage of understanding this aspect of nature. Sacred forests are not for simply ecosystems, but places where spiritual beliefs, communal identity, and customary law also converge. So colonial intervention disrupts not only political authority, but also the ecological worldview embedded in indigenous culture. Similarly, Leslie Marmon Silko's ceremony portrays the landscape as inseparable from Native American history, Native American memory, Native American spirituality. So, friend, these texts demonstrate that environments are shaped by cultural meanings and that environmental destruction often involves destruction of cultural heritage. The fourth feature is that environmental humanities give voice to the more than human world. Environmental humanities ask, can rivers speak? Can forests possess agency? Can animals become characters rather than symbols? This challenges traditional literary criticism. For example, Herman Melville's Moby Dick, most of us have read, transforms the white whale from a hunted animal to a more autonomous force that resists human domination. Captain Ahob's obsessive attempt to conquer the whale symbolizes humanity's desire to master nature, while whale's ultimate survival exposes the limits of human power. Likewise, Jack London's The Call of the Wild shifts narrative attention toward the experiences, toward instincts of buck, and allows the readers to perceive the world from animals' perspective. Jan Martel's The Life of Pi also similarly explores the complex coexistence of a human and animal life. So these works encourage readers to recognize animals as subjects with their own agency rather than passive objects serving human purposes. The fifth feature is environmental humanities study environmental justice. Environmental damage rarely affects everyone equally. It is poor communities who often suffer polluted rivers, toxic industries, displacement, mining, deforestation. So, environmental humanities therefore connect ecology with social justice. For example, Amitav Ghosh's Hungry Tide demonstrates that environmental conservation is inseparable from questions of justice. Set in the Sundarbans, the novel explores conflicts among wildlife conservation on the one hand, local livelihoods, government policies, migration, and poverty. The struggle to protect endangered species simultaneously threatens the survival of fishing communities locally and reveals that ecological policies often have unequal social consequences as well. Arundhati Roy's God of Small Things similarly connects environmental degradation with the caste discrimination, economic inequality, and political marginalization. So, friends, these novels show that environmental crises disproportionately affect vulnerable communities and therefore require ethical and social analysis alongside ecological concerns. Number 6, environmental humanities emphasize place. Environmental humanities ask the readers to understand first local ecology before you talk about global ecology, local memory, not global memory, local language, local biodiversity. Every place possesses its own ecological history. For example, Henry David Thoreau's Walden demonstrates how careful observation of a particular place can become a source of philosophical reflection and ecological understanding. Walden Pond is not merely the setting of the narrative. I think most of us would have read it, but an active participant in Thoreau's meditation on simplicity, sustainability, and human dependence on mutual systems. Similarly, Aldo Leopold's A Sand County Almanac records seasonal changes in a specific landscape to develop what he famously calls a land ethic. And again, Nan Shepherd's Living Mountain deepened this approach by presenting sustained engagement with the mountains as a form of ecological knowledge. So together, these books show that ecological awareness begins with intimate knowledge of local landscape. And number 7, environmental humanities recovers indigenous ecological knowledge. I think that the last lecture we had a very good exposure to this indigenous knowledge system. Many indigenous cultures have long practiced sustainable living. Environmental humanities encourage a dialogue between modern science and ecological thinking. For example, Silko's ceremony or Hogan's Solar Storms and Joy Harijo's, a Native American poet's poetry, illustrate how indigenous knowledge systems understand the humans as participants within interconnected ecological relationship rather than master over nature. These writers emphasize reciprocal responsibility toward land, animals, rivers, and ancestors. So, ecological wisdom, an important concept, an idea, is transmitted the story. Science cannot transmit ecological wisdom. Ecological wisdom is transmitted through stories or rituals or traditions, communal practices developed not in 1 or 2 years, but over centuries. So, environmental humanities value these traditions not as relics of the past, but as living alternatives to explore models of development. Such literature reminds the readers that sustainability often depends upon preserving indigenous ways of knowing. The eighth feature is humanity. The environmental humanities challenge the nature-culture divide, nature-culture binary opposition. Modern thought often separates nature from culture. Environmental humanities argue that humans are themselves ecological beings. Human beings are ecological beings. We are part of the ecology. And even cities, technologies, languages, literature, they're all ecological system. AI is an ecological system. For example, Barbara Kingsolver's flight behavior, already referred to in the previous talk, demonstrates that climate change cannot be separated from religion, cannot be separated from family life, cannot be separated from economics, cannot be separated from education or rural culture. The unexpected arrival of monarch butterflies transforms the lives of an Appalachian community and reveals that ecological events reshape human beliefs, human identities, and social relationships. Similarly, Ian McEwan's Solar portrays climate science as deeply entangled with politics, business, personal ambition, and moral responsibility. So these novels reject that traditional separation between nature and culture and show instead that environmental processes and human societies continuously shape one another. The ninth feature is environmental humanities study climate narratives. So climate change has become one of literature's central themes. And of course, we often use the word climate fiction in literature or cli-fi. And I think you must be familiar with Kim Stanley Robinson's The Ministry for the Future, which is one of the most ambitious literary explorations of global climate. Rather than focusing on a single protagonist, the novel presents multiple perspectives, say from scientists, economists, refugees, policymakers, activists, and ordinary citizens, in order to illustrate the planetary scale of the climate crisis. Again, Amitav Ghosh's Gun Island similarly links climate-induced migration, folklore, biodiversity loss, and global interconnectedness. In my understanding, Amitav Ghosh is singular in the sense that he is the only Indian writer who has been consistently concerned about the environmental issues in his literary creation. And Octavia Butler's A Parable of the Sower imagines a future America devastated by environmental collapse, social inequality, and political stability. Okay, so in a way, these writers are prophetic. So these works, friends, exemplify climate fiction by helping readers environmental futures that statistics alone cannot convey. And the 10th feature is that environmental humanities expands ethics beyond humans. Environmental humanities ask the questions like, do animals possess rights? Should rivers have equal personhood? Should rivers be treated as equal to human beings? Should future generations influence present decisions? Should our decision be influenced by what might happen in the future? So this expands ethics from human welfare to planetary welfare. We are not narrowly selfish about humans' welfare alone, but we have heightened that we started thinking about planetary welfare. Again, Barbara Kingsolver's Animal Dreams broadens these ethical concerns beyond human welfare by exploring the interconnected health of rivers, wildlife, agriculture, and communities. So environmental degradation is portrayed both as a moral and ecological failure, not just scientific failure. It is a moral and ecological failure because damage to ecosystems ultimately undermines human flourishing. And Han Kang's The Vegetarian, a South Korean novelist, was awarded Nobel Prize in 2024. Though not an overly environmental novel, still The Vegetarian questions human violence toward animals through protagonist's refusal to consume meat. Her personal transformation exposes broader assumptions about domination, consumption, and species hierarchy. So these texts encourage readers to extend ethical consideration to non-human life and ecological systems. Last but one feature, 11th feature, is that environmental humanities critique capitalism and consumerism. Many scholars argue ecological destruction results from endless economic growth. Environmental humanities therefore examine consumer culture, extraction, waste, and overproduction. For example, Margaret Atwood's Oryx and Crake presents a dystopian future in which corporate capitalism, genetic engineering, consumer culture, and environmental exploitation have pushed civilization toward ecological collapse. Nature is commodified, species are engineered for profit, and ethical considerations are subordinated to market interests. The novel warns that limitless economic growth and technological ambition, when detached from ecological responsibility, ecological wisdom, can become destructive forces. The sequel, Mad Adam, also continues this critique by imagining attempts to rebuild more sustainable relationships between humans and the natural world. So together, they expose the environmental consequences of unchecked consumerism. The last feature is that environmental humanities imagine sustainable futures. Environmental humanities are not pessimistic alone. They ask, what kind of future can literature imagine? Literature cannot talk about the past and present, but what kind of future can literature imagine? Hope becomes an important ecological category. Unlike many environmental narratives that emphasize catastrophe alone, Diane Wilson's The Sleep Keeper, a Dakota writer, offers a hope by recovering indigenous agricultural knowledge, seed preservation, community memory, and ecological stewardship. We had all these things in our Indian agricultural wisdom, and because of the scientific invention and discoveries, the farmers have been forced to adapt to the new systems of agricultural pattern. But now we all are paid for that. Novel suggests that sustainable futures depend upon remembering traditional relationship with the land rather than relying on technological solutions. So farmers can find solutions to their problem, but we impose technology on these helpless people. Again, Barbara Kingsolver's Prodigal Summer celebrates biodiversity, ecological restoration, coexistence between humans and wildlife through interconnected stories set in rural Appalachia. So, friends, these works demonstrate that environmental humanities are not merely concerned with diagnosing ecological crises alone, but also imagining ethical, resilient, and sustainable futures. And the next slide, please. As I told you that now we are basically English teachers, English academics. What implications do these theories and features have for English teachers? Okay, they're all theories. Now they have made these things, or literary writers, they have created as consumers, as literary academics. What are the implications? So taken together, these literary works illustrate that environmental humanities are not simply about adding nature as another theme in literary studies. Because of Supreme Court verdict now, from grade 1 to undergraduate level, there must be in every year, there must be a course on environmental science or themes like that. Not simply adding nature as another theme in our studies. Rather, environmental humanities transform the way we read literature. Don't wait for a course called Environmental Humanities or Eco-criticism. Don't confine your lectures, your concern, only that particular course, because environmental humanities can transform the very way we read all literary texts in general. Forests become characters rather than setting. Rivers become carriers of history and justice rather than scenic background. Animals emerge as a subject rather than symbols. Climate change becomes a cultural and imaginative challenge rather than merely a scientific fact. For English teachers, these texts provide powerful pedagogical opportunities to help students recognize that literature is essential medium. Don't try to teach literature as message. Literature is an essential medium through which societies understand ecological crises. Societies question dominant worldviews, recover alternative ways of living, and imagine more sustainable relationships with more than a human world. Okay, now the next slide, please. How can English teachers integrate environmental humanities? In our undergraduate, postgraduate programs, you have number of courses. How to integrate this into our curriculum? Teachers need not create a separate course, as I told you some time back. Existing text can be related through an ecological lens by asking questions that you see it on the is on the screen. When you deal with any text from 16th century onwards, before the advent of environmental humanity, last few years at the turn of the century, ask questions like, how is nature represented in this sonnet? Does nature possess agency when you deal with a particular novel? Who controls natural resources? Which communities are excluded? How do animals function in this text? What environmental values emerge? How does place shape identity? What forms of ecological injustice appear? So I given this question now. For example, let me illustrate. Take a King Lear. King Lear can be discussed in terms of the storm, more than as a backdrop, highlighting the interdependence of human vulnerability and natural forces. The romantic poetry of Wordsworth or Coleridge or Keats can be revisited, not simply as a celebration of scenic beauty, saying that you are more than this, you are my mentor, you are my guide, and all those literary poetic descriptions, let it be there. But how to bring in environmental humanities value into the class, but you can revisit this as reflections on ecological perception. Joseph Conrad's Heart of Darkness, which would have taught, can prompt a discussion about imperial extraction of natural resources. Friends, in Indian classrooms, again, Sundarbans in the Hundred Tide by Amitav Ghosh become a site where ecology, livelihood, conservation, and justice intersect. Next slide, please. Another important thing is that we are trained in English literature. How to teach the older text or present text from environmental point of view, eco-critical point of view. What is the vocabulary that is required? Okay, so what are the strategies? Now, I propose a vocabulary framework for English teachers that consists of 10 strategies. Okay, because how can English teachers acquire the necessary vocabulary to talk about the environmental literature? Having been trained in English language literature for 5 years, 6 years, having worked as professors of English for 2 decades, 3 decades, and so on, now immediately talk about environmental literature, you need to have necessary critical idioms and vocabulary without which you can't interpret a text from environmental point of view. This is perhaps the most important practical question for English teachers. As I said, most teachers are trained in literary periods, literary genres, critical theories, close reading, but not in ecological vocabulary. Fortunately, one does not need a degree in environmental science to teach environmental humanities. Rather, teachers need to develop a new critical vocabulary, a set of concepts. Learning set of vocabulary means learning set of concepts that enables them to ask ecological questions of literary text. Just as feminism, you never took a course on feminism, but we do teach feminism. Okay, we make a feminist interpretation of literary text. Just as feminism introduced terms such as patriarchy, gender performity, or male gaze, and post-colonial studies introduce hybridity, othering, subalternity. Environmental humanities also introduce a new language for reading literature. Okay, so I give you 10 strategies for you to adopt in your profession. Number one, next slide please. Begin with 4 fundamental concepts. We should not have any confusion about these 4 basic concepts, without which you cannot read environmental humanities, you cannot practice environmental humanities, you cannot interpret literary texts or cultural texts from environmental humanities point of view. So we must, the English teachers should first become comfortable with these 4 broad concepts. Number 1, environment. Number 2, ecology. Number 2, place. Number 3, sustainability. These concepts should become part and parcel of our intellectual makeup. Environment moves beyond the thinking of environment simply as, when you say environment, don't think of forest, don't think of rivers, don't think of mountains alone. In environmental humanities, environment means entire web of relationships among humans, animals, plants, climate, and technology. Nothing is excluded. Everything comes within this web. Literary question, for example, is what kind of environment does this text construct? We must ask. For example, Dickens' Hard Times constructs industrial environment, while Wordsworth constructs pastoral environment. So, environment is understood as a web of relationships among humans and all other stakeholders. Ecology refers to relationships. Okay, again, it's not nature, it's a relationship rather than isolated objects. Instead of asking, what does this tree symbolize? We English teachers are used to asking such question. What does this tree symbolize? Teacher should ask rather, how does this tree participate in the life of the narrative? How active is this tree? What is the contribution of this tree? Does this tree have agency? How are humans connected to animals? How are cities connected to rivers? How are economics and forests connected? If we start asking such questions, then we understand that we have a strong understanding of ecology. Place. Friends, environmental humanities distinguish between space and place. A place possesses memory. A place possesses identity. A place possesses history. It possesses language. And of course, it possesses emotional attachment also. For example, again, Sundarbans in the Hungry Tide is not merely a location. It's not merely a place. It shapes culture. It shapes livelihood. It shapes politics. It shapes identity. It shapes ecology. Now, the last concept which we should be sure about while you are dealing with environmental humanities is sustainability. Very often we avoid this term. We will shy of using this term, sustainable development, SDG goals. We think that's for science people or technology people or economics people. Teachers need not become climate scientists to talk about environmental, to talk about climate change. Instead, they ask, can this society continue living this way? Can the society afford to living this way, continue to living this way? Does the novel portray a sustainable or unsustainable relationship with the nature? We must learn to ask this question. This is strategy number 1. Strategy number 2, we must learn the vocabulary of eco-criticism. Okay, this is the second step to acquire the language developed by eco-critics for the past 30 years. I've given you these terms: anthropocentrism, human at the center, eco-criticism, nature has intrinsic value, biodiversity, variety of life, habitat, natural home, environmental justice, fair distribution of environmental benefits and harms, ecosystem, interdependent living system. Nobody is independent, everything is interdependent. Stewardship, responsible care, extraction, removal of natural resources, restoration, repairing damaged ecosystem. So these concepts soon become as familiar as irony, metaphor, symbolism, point of view, which you have been using for several years. So these terms also will become part and parcel of our vocabulary. Third, let's borrow vocabulary from climate studies. English teachers should not feel shy of reading books on climate studies, articles that appear in English newspapers or regional newspapers about climate studies. We should become familiar with the language of climate discourse. Maybe it includes climate change, global warming, carbon footprint. We must, without a sense of shame, we must ask each other, what is my carbon footprint score? Do I use AC? Do I use a fridge? Do I use automobile? Do I use a four-wheeler? Do I go by public transport system? It decides your carbon footprint score, resilience, adaptation, migration. I think most of the terms Professor Selvin employed in his talk on climate change. No? For example, Gos's Gun Island can be discussed using migration, climate refugees, sea level rise, biodiversity loss, and so on, without becoming a science lesson. And number fourth strategy is let us learn ethical vocabulary, because environmental humanities is fundamentally an ethical discipline. Teachers should become comfortable discussing responsibility, care, reciprocity, interdependence, coexistence, kinship, sustainability, justice, resilience. These terms help to move literary discussion beyond a symbolism with which now we are familiar. And number five, we must learn the language of animals also. Modern environmental humanities increasingly study animals as a subject rather than symbols. Useful concepts include species. Don't think that this is a term confined to zoology department. So you learn to use the word species, animal agency, multi-species communities, companion species, domestication, extinction, wildlife, habitat loss, and sentience, and so on. Now, for example, instead of saying the whale symbolizes evil, in literature classes we will say the whale symbolizes evil, instead of making that kind of statement, teacher may say, how does Melville grant agency to the whale? We can raise that type of question. And we can learn the vocabulary of landscape, because landscape is no longer scenery, as I told you. Teachers should discuss watershed. Don't think it is meant for agricultural students. Watershed, forest, wetland, coast, estuary, delta, mountain ecology, urban ecology, agricultural landscape. We must make use of all. Don't say that these terms are they don't belong to the English domain. For example, the marshes in Great Expectations become ecological landscapes instead of mere settings. And the seventh strategy is simply let us go through these three simple questions. No, teachers need not memorize hundreds of technical terms. Instead, every literary text may be approached using these three recurring questions. Keep these three questions in your mind. How is nature represented? Is it beautiful? Is it threatening? Is it exploited? Is it sacred? Is it alive? That's what we mean when we ask the question, how is nature represented? Second question, what relationship exists between humans and nature? Is it a domination? Is it coexistence? Is it dependence? Is it exploitation? Or is it reciprocity? What relationship is there between humans and nature? Any poem, any character, any novel, any drama, any non-fictional prose that you deal with, ask this question. The third question, final question, what environmental values does this text promote? Does it encourage conversation? Does it encourage extraction? Does it deal with consumerism? Does it focus on stewardship? Does it focus on sustainability? Friends, these questions alone can transform classroom discussion. And eighth strategy is build an environmental reading list. Vocabulary grows naturally through reading. That's why we encourage students to read literature. More we read, more stronger we become in terms of vocabulary. So teachers should begin with a small group of foundational texts rather than attempting master the entire field. Next slide, please. No, I give you a list of the foundational text which you, when you find time, you read, and then you can equip yourself to talk confidently, to discuss confidently this newer humanities called environmental humanities. And the last but one strategy is connect the new vocabulary. Next slide, please. Connect new vocabulary with familiar literary terms. Perhaps the easiest way for English teachers to acquire environmental vocabulary is to translate familiar literary concepts into ecological one. You learn, you transform, you learn new ones from whatever you are already familiar with, instead of treating them separately. I given you a list. Look at it. When you in traditional literary class, no, we say setting, aren't we? When we say setting, now in environmental humanity, we use the word ecological place. Here we say plot, there we say environmental transformation. Here we say character. In environmental humanities, we use the word agency, human agency or a non-human agency. Here we say a theme, and in the environmental humanities, we use ecological ethics. Here we say imagery, there we say ecological perception. So this approach helps teachers build on existing expertise instead of starting from scratch. The last strategy is be familiar with a practical lexicon. Okay, so if every English teacher became comfortable using these words, they would already possess the core vocabulary needed to teach. I have identified about 25 words to teach environmental humanities like ecology, environment, ecosystem, anthropocene, anthropocentrism, ecocentrism, biodiversity, sustainability, conservation, stewardship, environmental justice, climate change, climate fiction, habitat, species, extinction, place, landscape, indigenous knowledge, interdependence, agency, resilience, extraction. When you use these terms, you can effortlessly express the ideas that you want to express. Now, the last the point that I want to know that college teachers should guide students in navigating a very complex relationship, because our students are young adults. They won't simply accept what we say, because Gen Z students, they are in a mood of questioning whatever they learn. Okay, and when we talk about environmental humanities, naturally doubts that arises in the minds of the Gen Z people is the development. Can environmental humanities and the demands of modern development coexist? There is a conflict of interest between environmental humanities and development, or are they fundamentally at odds? So it is a teacher's duty, when you teach any literary text from environmental humanities point of view, students should not have this conflict. You must make it very clear that environmental humanities is not anti-development. Okay, it asks what kind of development is sustainable, ethically, socially, and ecologically. Development is necessary, no doubt about it. For a college student, the issue should be presented not as a choice between development and environment. Don't set the stage like that. There need not be any conflict between development and environment, but a critical inquiry into different modes of development. Number one, I say, development is necessary. Environmental humanities do not romanticize a return to pre-industrial past. No serious research scholars argue that societies should abandon roads, we should not build a hospital, we should not build industries, we should not build universities, electricity, digital technologies, or economic growth. It is not anti-development. Development is necessary. Developing countries like India continue to require infrastructure, employment, energy security, urbanization, technological innovation to improve the quality of life and reduce poverty. These goals are legitimate and necessary goals. The real question is development at what cost? Environmental humanities encourage students to ask different set of questions. Who benefits from development? Who bears environmental cost? Can economic growth occur without irreversible ecological damage? Are there alternatives that balance prosperity with sustainability? What responsibilities do we owe to future generations? So, friends, the debate shifts from whether development should occur to how development should occur. The third point is literature helps students explore complexity rather than choose sides. One of literature's greatest strengths that I understand in my career is that literature resists simplistic answers. No literary text gives you any final conclusion to the problem that it raises. Amitav Ghosh's Hungry Tide, wildlife conservation protects endangered ecosystem. Yet, restrictions on human activity also affect livelihoods of local fishing communities. Students quickly realize that there is no simple hero or a villain. Instead, they must weigh competing ethical claims. Similarly, in Arundhati Roy's essays on large dams, do we need dams or not? That is not the question. Students encounter the tension between national infrastructure project and displacement of marginalized communities. Whether or not they agree with the Roy's conclusions, they learn to analyze the social, economic, and environmental dimensions of development together. The fourth one, let us replace binary thinking with critical thinking. A useful pedagogical principle is to move students away from what I call false binaries such as development or environment, economy or ecology, humans or nature, growth or conservation. Let us encourage students ask a question. What form of development is most sustainable? How can economic and ecological goals be balanced? How are human well-being and ecological health interconnected? What models of growth support long-term conservation? So this approach, analytical thinking, rather than ideological commitment. And the next one is sustainable development. Sustainable development, is defined as development that meets needs of present without compromising the ability of future generation to meet their own needs. We are not making any decision for the future, but we must leave some space for future generation to meet their own needs. At that cost only we can have development. So this concept acknowledges both legitimate aspiration for economic progress and the limits imposed by ecological systems. It provides students with a vocabulary for discussing trade-offs rather than framing every issue as an absolute choice. Then, evidence-based discussion. For adult learners, college students, teachers should avoid presenting environmental questions as settled moral conclusion. Teachers should never ever become priests, giving a wholesome moral lesson. Instead, they should invite students to examine evidence from multiple perspectives. For example, should a forest be cleared to build a hospital? We need a hospital. Should a forest be cleared? If so, what would happen? What would be the consequences? Should a hydroelectric dam be constructed if it supplies clean energy but displaces villages? Should mining proceed if it creates, say, employment but threatens biodiversity? Let students consider competing values and justify their reasoning with evidence. And last one, friends, the role of literature. Literature does not supply policy descriptions. Its distinct contribution is to cultivate imagination and ethical reflection. A novel or a poem or a play can illuminate the lived experience of humanities affected by development. They can reveal cultural significance of landscape. They can make visible voices that economic statistics alone may overlook. So this complements rather than replaces economic and scientific analysis. So friends, our educational goal is not to produce environmental activists by default. Don't aim at that, but to cultivate critically informed citizens, particularly Gen Z students must critically cultivate this informed citizenry who can evaluate competing visions of development with intellectual vigor, ethical sensitivity, and appreciation of both human aspirations and realities. To conclude, environmental humanities represent one of the most significant transformations in contemporary English studies. They move beyond reading literature solely for aesthetic appreciation with which we are used or linguistic analysis, but invite us to see literary texts as vital sites for understanding ecological relationships, environmental ethics, and planetary futures. Environmental humanities encourage teachers to read not only about nature, but with an awareness of interconnectedness of humans, animals, plants, rivers, oceans, and the atmosphere. Interconnectedness, that is the essence of environmental humanities. Okay, for college English teachers, this shift offers an opportunity to reimagine the classroom. A poem becomes more than an artistic object. It becomes a conversation about ecological values. A novel becomes more than a narrative. It becomes a way of understanding climate, a way of understanding justice, a way of understanding memory, a way of understanding place. So in this sense, environmental humanities do not diminish the importance of literature. Rather, they reaffirm its enduring capacity to cultivate imagination, to cultivate empathy, to cultivate ethical responsibility in an era of unprecedented environmental change. As Amitav Ghosh argues in The Great Derangement, non-fictional prose, climate crisis is also a crisis of culture, a crisis of imagination. that can be set right only by literature. So the environmental humanities respond by restoring literature to its vital role in helping societies imagine more just, sustainable, and ecologically connected ways of living. So for English teacher, this is not merely in a new academic field, it is an invitation to shape environmentally literate, ethically responsive, and critically engaged citizens through the transformation power of literary education. And the last slide, please. I have given you my book. The link is also given. This title, New Humanities, 16 New Humanities, Nuances, Narratives, and Navigations. If you are interested, you can have access to the book that is available in the on the Amazon. So thank you very much, organizers, for your invitation to be part of this 15-week long webinar series. Now over to the organizers. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. It was a wonderful presentation. And dear participants, you can drop your questions in the chat box. The expert would help you understand more. To start with, I have a question, sir.
Yes, Professor.
Don't mistake me. See, when you started the conversation, you mentioned that to run a MA in Digital Humanities, they closed the program because of English department cannot run that program because it needs interdisciplinary expertise there. From a digital humanities perspective, I know that the department needs little bit of computer science experts to run the program. If that is the case, what is your opinion on running environmental humanities? Don't we, if we apply the same here, we might need interdisciplinary experts in the Department of English also. How do you see this, sir?
I totally agree with you, Professor, but there is small difference between digital humanities and environmental humanities. That environmental humanities does not require technological intervention as far as English department is concerned, but still we can have an MOU with science department. They can sensitize us on certain issues that we normally tend to overlook, or we may not be familiar with. So it is nothing wrong in having interdepartmental expertise are drawn from other departments. The university, the private university that I referred to, I think that it won't be ethical on my part if you disclose the name of the university, because I'm sure, because one of my old students is working there, offshore campus. They have now come back to the traditional language literature program this year, because there are almost a nil admission, he told me. And the problem is that we rush to introduce MA Digital Humanities without doing sufficient background work by the English department, and we need to do, because as I told you, these are all these 100 odd emergent humanities are all roughly 25 to 30 years old, less than some humanities less than a decade old. These things have to be adapted. We need to do a lot of reading and research. We need to produce a lot of research output and findings before we think in terms of starting a program, that to postgraduate program, without a feeder section. Like we have not included such courses at undergraduate level, and straight away starting postgraduate program and digital humanities has not invited, has not encouraged Indian society to join. They'll also be worried about the career prospects. If I do this, what can I become? So there are multiple reasons, I think, that for the failure of this program. Maybe it's only a temporary setback. Maybe in the years to come, the decades to come, a day will come that English departments will become well versed with the technology. And even now, I think that now with a little knowledge of technology, I am learning from people from computer science, data science in American college, how to apply this particular thing, app, and how the tool in order to make a sentimental analysis of 100 novels or poems written during 17th century, what you call distance reading. But as you rightly said, that now we should keep on expanding our horizon of knowledge, taking input from different directions.
Thank you, Professor. That's what I also guessed. It might be as well a political or insufficient planning that would have demise of that program. And Professor, let's move to the questions. I could see Mr. Gopinath has raised a question. Sir, I want to know how the theory of resilience and Pierre Bourdieu's habitus, cultural capital, and field have changed the landscape of new humanities, particularly Indian cricketer's autobiography.
Is he asking about resilience theory, Professor?
Yeah, he's asking the theory of resilience and Pierre Bourdieu's habitus cultural.
Yeah, I understand, because I didn't give example. I don't know what he has in his mind. But when we say that systems theory and resilience theory have informed environmental humanities, I just give you two simple examples to understand what we mean by systems theory, resilience theory, because they are all non-literary theory, so we may be unfamiliar with that. So this is where, as Pro Selvin indicated, implied, we need to improve our knowledge of other disciplines. We shouldn't be dependent on other departments. We should become independent with knowledge drawn from this. For example, system theory, I just give an explanation, I give an example. A village pond is a part of a larger system. Okay, it's a part of a larger system. It is connected to rainfall, groundwater, fish, aquatic plants, birds, farmers, livestock, nearby villages. If rainfall decreases or the pond is polluted, the fish, crops, animals, people are all equally affected, because every part of the system is interconnected. This is what we mean by systems theory. And when we talk about the resilience theory, suppose the pond experiences a severe drought. If rain returns and the pond gradually refills, plants regrow, fish population recover, farming resumes, the pond has shown resilience now. So the ability to recover from disturbance while continuing to functions. This is what we mean by the resilience theory. And of course, we can apply this theory to other aspects of environmental humanities.
Thank you, sir. One Mr. Tagai Fatin, I think he's from abroad, he's asking a question. Is the Anthropocene a colonial or cultural / religious construction?
I would say all have contributed, particularly the last one. It is because almost all human societies are basically religious. Each religion has got its own story, its own cultural background to tell us. Almost all religions treat humans as Shakespeare uses paragon of all virtues. In God's creation, human beings are at the top, and they are given to understand that everything exists in this world because for the sake of humanity. So all these 3 points are included, but I think basically it is the religion that has played a vital role in this anthropocentric view of the entire universe.
Thank you, Professor. Another one named Riddhi of Dayal. She's asking, what is the word that you spelled, sir, that means all beings are connected and that humans are only a part of the network and not the center of it? Can you spell it again?
This is the term I told you, it was playfully created by Donna Haraway in her book. C, that stands for ik. It represents the sound ik. Okay, ik. So C, TH, CH, TH, ULUCENE. Cluthune. You prefix ik also if it is possible. It creates a kind of consonant clusters. So cluthocene, meaning we are all interconnected. Not man alone, not human beings alone.
And another question from DMI Arthur. How do we understand the language of animals?
What matters is attitude, because from anthropocentric point of view, we have been under the impression that human alone possess a language, that system. So each society, community, linguistic community has its own language system. But I think students of language and literature will understand that each, including flora and fauna, in botany, people will understand plants have their own languages, animals, insect, bees, no, they have their own language system, what you call communication system, maybe different from our systems. We think ours is superior to, that's the problem, no? So we conveniently imagine that not just animal, even plants, touch me not plant, for example, if you touch it, it shrinks. That is how it shows its reaction to human touch. So all living beings, even non-living, we think that mountains are non-living, but rocks, no, they also bleed when you break it, when you extract. So everything, that is a matter of attitude, matter of sensitivity. All living and non-living, that's why it's a new materialism. Living and non-living, all matters matter. They have their own. But religions have taught otherwise. No, human beings alone have conscience. Human beings alone have soul, and all those theories. Now we have constructed from anthropocentric point of view. So I think that most of us have pets at home, dogs or cats. We understand that, we understand their language. They are not able to open their mouth and speak the language that we speak, but we do understand the language through its body language. So the way they box at the stranger, the way it box at the owner, no, we do understand there's a difference between which shows affection, which shows a warning. So it's not a difficult thing for us to understand the language of not necessarily animals, all non-living, living, other than human beings.
So added to that, sir, I feel it is an epistemic violence on
Excellent.
our part. When I say our part, the adults, because
Yeah.
even we don't ask our children what world we should create and what world we should live in. So
Yeah.
even the children and even the tribals and even the marginalized, that's what Gayatri says. There is no voice actually. So I think you have to put animals to that category and then we can look at it. Then we will be able to understand the animals.
Yeah, we can include, as I said, we can include animals and insects as a subalterns.
Yeah, that's what I see.
Makes sense. But we human beings as superior beings, now we are making others as subalterns.
Correct, yeah. So, sir, another question from Sneka K. Sir, can you explain the need of environmental justice in the present scenario?
I think the present scenario requires immediate intervention as far as environmental justice is concerned, because in all natural disasters which are caused by human activities, I said human activity has become geological force, Anthropocene. Present context require immediate intervention, attention to this environmental injustice, because in any natural calamity, as I told you, caused hugely by human activity, no, it is the poor people who suffer, whether it no, who suffer when city of Chennai is flooded or a medium-sized town like Madurai is flooded. Who suffer? Those people who are living in huts on the banks of the river, the Kovam or low-living area. No, people are living in apartment. People who are living in independent individual houses, they don't suffer as much as So usually the poor people suffer when there is an epidemic. It is the poor people, they suffer. So. Not necessarily in the present context. In all contexts down the history, I think that environmental justice has been a demand, and now it is it's more visible. The demand for environmental justice is more visible in the present day context because of huge awareness that is being created by literary and cultural studies in different forms. May not be through printed text, maybe through films, music, and other art forms. People have become increasingly aware of the environmental justice.
Thank you, sir. And another question, I think I would take this question if you permit. Nandita
Yes, sir.
Anbu asks, sir, is there any university in India that offers an interdisciplinary department to undertake research to deal with environmental humanities? All the emerging humanities are collaborative, as you said. Before you answer, I would answer first.
Yes, please go.
Hello, Ms. Nandita Anbu. I am happy to inform you that St. Joseph University, Dindivanam, it offers interdisciplinary research in the Department of English. And one Mr. Joseph Dunstan, who is the mentor of this program, the webinar, he is an expert in blue humanities. And he has conducted extensive research in blue humanities. And there are a lot of research currently happening in the St. Joseph University, Dindivanam. For example, in medical humanities, in blue humanities, in environmental humanities, and even in digital humanities, we have a lot of research happening. So, Nandita, so St. Joseph University is one that is currently putting this sort of avant-garde research in place. Sir, next question is Talaha, I think, asking a question. Sir, what do you think about tree communication?
Tree. Eh?
Yeah, tree communication. TREE.
Yeah, as I told you, touch me plant, for example, when you touch it, it shrinks. It has to communicate with human beings. So I think botany people have got lots of documented knowledge about how flora and fauna communicate, and I think there are a number of books also on communication of tree communication. And one thing is that we must first believe that non-human beings also communicate with the human being, and we must be sensitive about it. So, as Pro Selvin said, that we need more knowledge about all about other disciplines. We can't talk about only our discipline. So, no doubt that there is a tree communication, no doubt about it, as much as animal communication.
Yeah, correct. Thank you, sir. Another one is asking Meena, can you please show again the slides with a list of novels? Meena, I think we are running short of time. We can't show the slides. And all the participants, please keep in mind, we will be sharing the YouTube of St. Joseph University. All the webinars are recorded in Zoom. And we are currently editing all the videos, and we will be posting these videos in the YouTube so that all the webinars are permanently stored in the YouTube, and you will be able to use it for your research, because the only motive of running this webinar is to disseminate knowledge. So only we have kept it all completely free, right? So don't worry, we will share you the YouTube link soon. And sir, I think we would take one last question from Kartika S. Sir, should we use posthumanism to research the human-animal-plant environmental connection, or is it oriented more towards humans technology? She's asking a post-humanist question. She says that what is the connection between human-animal plants?
Post-humanism, post-human humanity is a different area, but still you have raised it not just technology alone. As I told you, post-humanism includes every stakeholder other than along with human beings. Okay, not technology alone. Technology also plays a role. For example, I can't be a human being. I cannot talk to you. I can't see anything without my specs. So specs has become pacemaker. Some people have, it becomes part of our life. So technology becomes part of human existence, but not technology alone. No, I cannot live alone without without the contributions from plants and animals. No, that's why I use the word interdependent. We dependent on each other. So we can do a lot of research. You can, I mean, in terms of literary and cultural text, no, on from post-humanist point of view. There have been a number of research already permitted. And as Professor Selvian rightly pointed out, it is a state university run by government. You know, these research departments, research committees, or traditional in their outlook. When you have environmental humanities, immediately from biotechnology department, how do you know? How are you qualified to use this theme in your discipline? You belong to English. Whereas a private university, like as Professor Selvian said, St. Joseph University, I know several universities, including State University in Kerala, they do encourage multidisciplinary research, not simply interdisciplinary, multidisciplinary research. Before this is research that is one track. Another track is that, as UGC has been time and again recommending, and as NEP 2020 is emphasizing the course of time we must make MA English Language Literature program also gradually multidisciplinary. We can't stick on to the old canonical courses. I'm not saying we should do away with the courses, but somehow now there must be a unit on knowledge from other disciplines in each of the courses that we offer. So that will be an ideal thing. Research is one track, curriculum planning, revisiting is another area.
Yes, sir, correctly said, sir. And I would also add to that point, I think, dear participants, go and search for Derrida's article on the Beyond Man and the Animal article. That would really give you the right theoretical base to catapult your research ideas. So there is another question. How does material eco-criticism help us understand the agency of non-human matter in environmental narratives?
Sorry, but could you please
How
repeat the
does
question?
material eco-criticism help us understand the agency? Material eco-criticism help us understand the agency of non-human matter in environmental narratives.
As I told you, what matters is that the conviction that non-human entities have their own agencies. If we are convinced about it, then all problems are solved. We may not have any issues related to that. All non-living matter to us for our existence. Their own agencies, and we can focus on the perspectives. We can the point of views of these non-human entities in literary and cultural texts, and then we can make appropriate interpretation rather than waiting for some theories coming and informing us. So whatever little knowledge of theory that is available, because it's very difficult for an academic like us to master theories, because theories are multidisciplinary coming from different disciplines. For to understand one theory, you cannot go on reading books from different disciplines. That will take our own lifetime. So whatever little knowledge that we know we are exposed to, we can have analysis of cultural and literary texts. But ultimately, we should not move away from literary cultural texts because they are the backbone of our discipline. Yeah.
Thank you, sir. And we have come to the end of the session. I think there are no more questions, and we have to wind up the webinar today. And we come to the final gratitude session of the webinar. I would love to sincerely thank our founder father, Reverend J.E. Arulraj, for blessed us this 15-week webinar. And I would love to thank our Vice Chancellor, Dr. Subaya Bharati, for guiding us through this 15-week webinar. My sincere thanks goes to our mentor, Dr. G.M. Joseph Dunstan, for being the logistical pillar and logical support for the entire webinar sessions. And my sincere thanks goes to my team in the department, Dr. Sarulata, Mr. Sam Surya, Mr. Ilandarayan, and Ms. Narmada for supporting me in this journey. And my heartfelt thanks goes to Dr. John Sekar for giving us a wonderful evening, making the day. Actually, I would personally say you made my day, sir, and every one of us. And thank you. And thanks to all participants for your patient wait for every 5-6 days to see yet another Saturday. Next Saturday is going to be yet another humanities, and we will meet you on next 15th of August. That will be a different topic altogether. And thank you, everyone, and have a good night. Thank you. Sam, if you want to announce anything, please, you can announce.
Sir, nothing from my side, sir.
Okay, thank you. And I'm going to close the webinar. Okay.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Bye-bye.